In the One Piece trading card game, there's over 100 leaders and so many different decks among those leaders that you can play for not only competitive format, but also casual, any other format that you want to try. Unfortunately though, like most other card games, there's only a small selection of those leaders that are worth playing to major tournaments. And a lot of them just fall to the wayside. In OP12 though, you want to be different from the average schmuck. You don't want to succumb to the best deck, and you don't want to hit a mirror match along the way. You want to cause absolute chaos in your opponent's eyes as you reveal a leader that they honestly forget what it does. Like myself, you're a fan of the rogue decks. A leader that falls under the radar and although may not win a championship, you can still get a decent amount of wins. Sometimes you get lucky, especially when your opponent has no idea what the f is going on. And just like a regular meta evaluation, there's different slots of viability among these rogue leaders, so we're gonna rank them. But first, a word from our sponsor. If you've been following the channel a while, it's no secret that I absolutely love Nen Garden playmats and designs. Ranging from their One Piece themed playmats like the Heavenly Yaksha that I use all the time, upcoming card games like Gundam, where they have the White Devil playmat, which I can't wait to use at locals, as well as brand new designs they're constantly coming out with, like this smiling playmat, which is absolutely gorgeous. I will get one. They've also got this brand new Tony Chopper pre-order for both regular and XL, which is one of the cutest playmats I've seen, and there's even a Labubu on it. You can save some money at checkout on your next favorite playmat by using the code Atrocious. My code's actually been bumped up to 8% that you can save on checkout on these already slashed prices. Make sure to click the link in the description below, not only to help support the channel, but also a great friend of the channel. Thank you, Nen Garden, for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to that video, actually. All right, so let's get a baseline here first so we're all on the same page. First, if your leader's not on this list, congrats, it's a meta deck.
Please do not comment how blue-purple Luffy should be a rogue deck.
I have S as the top ranking. I can see this winning a major event or taking up multiple spots within a top cut. The A ranking refers to decks I could see make an appearance in the top cut of a major championship, but probably won't win. B is the I win locals all the time because I've played thousands upon thousands of games with this deck kind of deck. C is the fun but go 2-2 every local tournament. And F, I just honestly, I wouldn't play F. And now that we have that out of the way, let's finally go to ranking them. The first one I'm actually going to rank is Dragon. Now, I'm actually going to put Dragon in S tier. We did see it get top 16 in the Grand Asia Open this past weekend, and I actually found the deck list of the player that piloted it in that tournament to a top spot. There's a lot of interesting things about the deck, and I highly encourage you subscribe to the channel if you want to see the deck profile coming out later this week all about this deck. I think that it's actually really funny and really interesting as well, because I definitely put it by the wayside, but I've seen the light. I'm also going to get Rosinante out of the way because I am super high on this deck in terms of the rogue decks. I made a whole like 30+ minute video on it on the channel earlier last week, and so I won't spend too much time talking about it, but if you want to go check out that video, that's already on the channel for you. Don't worry, there's still plenty of more decks that I'll put in that top tier, but I'm gonna go ahead and fill out the C and the F tier because I really don't want to spend time talking about those leaders.
A few moments later.
All right, so now we got that out of the way, go ahead in the comments and tell me why I absolutely shafted your leader. I'll wait. Go ahead. Get to typing. You gotta tell me your reasoning, because I'll never understand unless you tell me. I'm gonna go ahead in the B tier and start out with Perona. Now, originally when I first made this tier list, I actually had Perona lower in the C tier, but then I thought about how underexplored it was, right? Green definitely got a huge enhancement in OP12, and being able to like play the 8-cost Dracula Mihawk and maybe do something else on top of that may just be one of the things that Perona is kind of looking for in a lot of situations. situations. I've also got Odin in the B tier. I've played a little bit of Odin myself, and I'm a big fan of that guy. He just kind of suffers from the one body per turn mechanic that a lot of these other kind of rogue decks play, and how they don't survive because you need to play out multiple bodies per turn, and only a few decks can actually handle surviving playing one body per turn in this format and in the game right now overall. I'll throw Dofi up in the A tier, the king who fell when the Jinbei ban list came out, and also then the OP11 format of blue purple Luffy. Doflamingo's definitely been on the decline, but especially since it can still be a strong deck, right? Having more than enough of the functions of cheating out bodies and the sword, it's a strong candidate to be able to still press pressure on bodies while having a little bit of removal on itself, especially in some of the other rogue kind of swarm matchups. I still think Dofi is fine. I just don't know if I would play myself. It's a fraction of what it used to be. Trafalgar Law I'll throw in the B tier. This is one of the most cope decks of all time outside of Buggy, but Trafalgar Law, right, being able to constantly spruce up bodies, place them left, right, center onto the field, very similar to something like Green Yellow Law, is just missing a piece or two in its breakthrough to really run in the spotlight. It's a fast, aggressive deck, and in a format where you need to be fast and aggressive in order to survive, Trafalgar Law can definitely do some damage. Edward Newgate, I'll put you up in A tier. You can move up to S tier if your name is JCM, but especially since he had such a breakthrough with that deck, we've seen more people pilot this and do a little bit better within this format. There are definitely some things that really hinder you, especially with the introduction of Zoro and the Dead Man's Game event card, but being the premier and original 6K leader in the format, you still have a lot of great things going for you in a lot of different matchups. Smoker, I'll put in the B tier. I think Smoker's was like honestly the biggest loser outside of Black Yellow Luffy with the ban list, right? A deck that was still rogue when Gecko and Ice Age was around, really just getting the boot. Now, I will say though that you still have opportunities to play incredible cards similar to how Rob Lucci does, while also having your own kind of unique removal with stuff like the 5-cost Tashigi. This deck could maybe still do a little bit of damage, especially with removal on these swarm bodies, right? Think about how Rob Lucci can just delete the Sanji Linlin combo and be able to still stay afloat for the long game. Smoker can almost do that same thing. It's just a little bit harder and a little bit worse. Ace moves into the other B deck, right? Whitebeard Pirate's just a nice typing and potentially more Whitebeard Pirates on the horizon, but right now it's just a really fun deck to play, right? Being able to use your events as extra counter and have that red aggression on the board. Arlong I'll put in B. I wanted to put it in A, but like Arlong, for everybody that blew up about it, right? Especially when OP11 first came out, I would probably move it up to A, I think, honestly, at the very end. It has just been much more underwhelming than what a lot of people gave it credit for, especially when the last couple formats had originally started, and it really hasn't done anything at all. It's maybe won a couple flagships. I'm thinking about putting it in B. I don't know. I'll stick with my original gut feeling and put it in B. I know some of you will be angry at that. Now, Nami, I'm going to throw in S, right, as a Japan Championship winner. I think that kind of automatically qualifies you in the S category because, well, you did win a major. Although definitely not one of the more popular decks, we've seen it on top of the Rogue rankings throughout the recent championships that we've covered on the channel. Still have like a potential spot within this meta. It's actually been quite interesting with the introduction of decks like Rayleigh, Kuzan, right, and blue-purple Luffy and green-purple Luffy still running around rampant. Although the deck may not have changed too much and maybe has adjusted several cards, it still does what it wants to do. Katakuri I've got in B tier. I mean, as long as you have the 10-drop Linlin, like, you're still a relevant game plan, and being able to give yourself plus 1,000 power for that 1 Dawn play can be really nice, actually, to have a 1 Dawn investment and force a 2K out of something like green-purple or blue-purple Luffy's hand. Unless you have a great triggers, right? Like the Kiku Nojo or maybe Perospero in there, you're still just a one body per turn leader. Rebecca, I'll also put in B. I think Rebecca is really interesting, right? But as a leader that can attack, I think the leaders that just can't attack are not worth playing. I think they were a very interesting design when they first started coming out in like OP03 with Iceberg, and they tried it a couple times, right? With Vegapunk, Rebecca, things of that nature. But I think Rebecca just doesn't do what it wants to do fast enough to really make an impact within the game. But there are some really funny things that you could do with it. Like Cross had made that like infinite loop Rebecca, which was actually hilarious to watch. I love that. Bello Betty, I'm going to put up in S, but I'm really close to putting it in A. Now, Bello Betty might surprise a lot of you that it's a rogue deck, because especially in OP11 right now, Bello Betty is a good deck. It's a great deck, honestly, maybe even a top 3. But with the introduction then of OP12 with Rayleigh, Zoro, Kuzan running around, Buggy, Bello Betty, which was the counter to the top decks, gets countered by all these other decks that are rushing within the meta. We've seen it on the steep decline out in the East in the Japan Championships and the Grand Asia Open, and who knows, maybe the West kind of holds on to that, which is why I still think it could be viable. And especially in a diverse format, you just never know. Anel, I think, is also in S tier. Anel is just one of those decks that it's extremely hard to play against. If you're not ready, you're not going to do well against it, right, for the most part. And we see a couple spurts from this leader every so often. I absolutely love watching it, especially when I'm not the one playing against it. And when you're healing so much potentially and you have good removal even without Raigo, you've got a shot a lot of times. Yamato is also in this S tier category, right? We've seen some spurts of Yamato as of late in Top Cuts and also in the Grand Asia Open. And how maybe if we built it a little bit differently, it could be a much more viable archetype. I mean, when you're constantly going double attack and you're a 4-life leader, right? Or, I mean, even a 5-life leader or a 3-life leader, a double attack to the dome hurts a lot of times. And so it'll be curious to see where Yamato goes, and I think I want to cover it on the channel from watching it in the Grand Asia Open, so let me know if you'd want to see that. Reiju, I've got in A tier. I love Reiju. I think it's such a fun deck to pilot and also just play, and I would have put it in S, but a lot of times, like thinking about Rayleigh on how they can just clap back at you really, really fast, or maybe something like Zoro where they rest your bodies and then slam into them, so you don't really have too many bodies on the field and you're always going to be behind on Dawn. Maybe Reiju was a better play moments prior. I still like it though. I would play it to a major tournament. Gecko I've got in the B tier along with the other copers, I will say. It's really cool every once in a while to see Gecko like win a flagship or something like that, especially in some of the more wackier builds that we've seen, but I just don't see it happening for this big bad black leader. Is he bad? I'm pretty sure Gecko is bad. I'm not caught up yet, but he can cheat out bodies very well with his leader effect, and the removal may be enough to be able to sneak in some wins. I've also got Boa, oops, a little too high in this category. The biggest loser on the Jinbei ban, in my opinion, really just hurt the deck so much in its potential aggression and control, but you can still do plenty of great things with the removal aspect and being able to cycle cards. Foxy I'll put right next to Boa in the B category. I think Foxy is super funny, right? Especially when you get like your Exodia package of the 7 drops on the field and then being able to use your leader effect and cycle to not only like minus the entire board on your opponent's turn, but also freeze your opponent's leader, right? Especially in a matchup like Green Zoro, Foxy can actually do a fun amount of damage to your opponents. I'd be really curious to see if anybody like really takes hold of this leader in the Western OP12 format. Vegapunk is in this A tier as well. A great aggressive leader, right? We've even showcased it a little bit on the channel to where sometimes your opponent just can't answer the amount of blockers that you have, the amount of bodies that you're putting out and doing poke damage, and really force them to have something like Hody Jones, Gravity Blade, Dead Man's Game, something of the sort. Vegapunk's also just a fun leader to play. I really enjoy it, but I wish we would see it in a top cut of a championship again. I got the Christmas Chopper in the B tier. He's a good little guy and he's a ton of fun, especially on the aggressive side, but I feel like Chopper, you burn out pretty quickly, and your burnout is a lot easier to get to compared to something like Zoro. If you're going to play like a funny animal aggro deck, I definitely think you play Zoro instead of Chopper, but I can see why there's a lot of believers in Chopper that just have a ton of fun with this deck. Marco, I'm going to put in the S tier. If you saw at the beginning of the 11 format, Control Marco was a viable pick, right? Definitely in the S tier, and I still think that kind of holds true a little bit today. Being able to manipulate the top of your deck, abuse 9-cost Sanji or other Whitebeard Pirates cards, minusing power, have good removal. There's people that are big believers like Eggman of the sorts that when I watch it on stream, I'm like, wow, this is a really cool deck to play. It's definitely underpopulated comparatively to a lot of these other S tier decks, but I think is one that if you've put the time into and you bought the Rayleighs and stuff before the PRB 02 reprint news, you can play them a little bit and get your money's worth. Carrot, I think I'm going to move in A. When I made that post about Carrot and if it was like, what are your favorite rogue decks? And a lot of you said Carrot, whether that was on Twitter, whether that was on the YouTube post, I started thinking more and more about Carrot and all the freezing that it can do and just like nullify what your opponent is doing. I find it also to be an extremely underexplored deck and I'd highly encourage people to check it out, but maybe you're just better off playing Bonnie. I don't know. Now, Kalgara I've also got in the A tier. Kalgara's actually seen a decent amount of success in the OP11-12 format. Right, I've mentioned this 1,000 times, but OP Hirata, when they posted those statistics, had Kalgara as the #1 leader in terms of wins, the highest win percentage of that format, or of that time period. I think it was like 10,000 games compiled. I still think the same holds true a little bit with Kalgara and how its aggressive style, right, can be advantageous in a lot of different games. It just doesn't have the results like many of these other S tier decks do though. Shanks I'm gonna put in B tier, man. I am a tier 1 Shanks hater, I think. The fact that blue purple Luffy came into the meta, you had Zoro being able to rest things and KO them. You had Rayleigh just out tempoing you. Shanks, very similar to Bello Betty, just fell off, man. And again, it's that 1 card per turn played situation that these decks have that they just can't thrive with in this format. Now, the new starter decks are really interesting and I think you can play around with that, but I think this meta shift has really just hurt you the most. Lim, I've also got an A tier, right? A great swarm deck, being able to play these like 6,000 power bodies that can go ahead and poke at 6,000 power leaders. Really had its breakthrough right when Fletch ended up winning that regional with Lim, and ever since then it's just been underwhelming. He played it at the right time, the right place, against the right meta, but it's still a good deck to play, especially at the lower levels. I want to put Black Eel Luffy in one of these two tiers, and there's definitely a really good debate on if Black Purple Luffy should just be in this tier list or not. Especially when the new starter decks came out, a lot of people were pretty high on Black Purple Luffy, and I don't think that that reason has no base. It's just despite all the great stuff that it could be, it just has not been. There's been very few tournaments where it's been a majority of the meta, and even at that, it still doesn't really do well. I just don't really think I can get behind it. Now, Robin has some interesting things along with it that I would love to maybe showcase that I've seen some people actually play around with in the last couple weeks of what this deck could look like in 12. Similar to Yamato and having a essentially like different kind of leader effect or double leader effect with either double attack or banish or another key word. I think the banish is the least impactful of the 3, blocker, double attack, or that banish. And its saving grace is the ramp that it can potentially get to be able to go fast and play out these big bodies really easily. Usopp as well has seen better days, but our favorite captain of the Straw Hat crew still can do a little bit of damage with a deck that has good synergy within itself, right? The Dressrosa archetype is nothing to slouch at, at, and you can do some good stuff with it. We've seen it have spurts in the past couple formats and haven't really seen it jump within OP12, but who knows if someone could crack it. Kobe I'm going to put in A. I'm not ready to put it in S, but I will acknowledge that it's had great success within the Chinos Cups of OP12 and 11, I believe. It's not a bad deck, and if you want to play it within the format, power to you, hope you do well. But I think just the red-black synergy is not totally there yet within the color combination to push it to a higher level, as in like a half green deck could, or maybe a blue deck or a purple deck. I love watching Jinbei, and I love putting him in the blue tier, the B tier right now. We've had some locals over here have some pretty good success with Jinbei, and I showed you guys that deck list in Discord in OP11, but 12 you gotta kind of think about like more Zoro and Rayleigh type stuff. If you got a decent matchup into blue purple Luffy though, are you really a bad rogue deck? Nami I've got in S. I really debated on whether or not I actually wanted it in this tier list at all, because we've seen it have some great stuff within tournaments, and we've seen it also be nowhere at all in the meta shares. I think this deck really hinges on starter deck 22, which is why I think I ultimately put it back down in this rogue category, but it'll be interesting to see in OP12 if people can do some damage with this blue-yellow leader. Katakuri I've also got in S tier, right? One of the OP11 leaders, had a little bit of limelight when it first came out, especially with the Big Mom Pirates synergy, but I think until they make a ban, I think he's a little bit too slow within this format. The ramping is really interesting. The being able to look at the top of your opponent's deck and be a 6,000 power leader, I think is also really interesting. And I think you're one thing short in the purple package Big Mom Pirates from being a meta relevant deck. I've also got Kuzan up here. There's a lot of fans of Kuzan, especially in the East, and I think the West is going to follow with some of that fandom, and it's honestly a pretty decent deck, right? Being able to draw cards constantly, have something that freezes as well as spam out bodies is definitely a recipe of success, especially when you can filter your hand so much that you don't have bricks. I'm a huge fan of the Kuzan deck. I've played around a little bit with it, and I think that there's something there, and it's shown up in plenty of different tournaments where it's had a good meta share, but it just hasn't had that like big breakthrough yet. Sanji I've also got in the S tier. Sanji had multiple appearances in that one OP12 tournament, and especially as they were the same deck list, I don't think that's a big surprise that it's in this S tier. I know that a Kailakayan is really, I mean, it was a really, really good meta evaluation video of OP12. He really talked about that deck and the deck list that we ended up watching in the tournament. If you want like a much better breakdown of it, and it's honestly one of the decks in OP12 that I want to make a video about and I'm super interested in. Sanji's saving grace that although it is a one body per turn deck, all of those bodies pretty much have rush. It's not the premier aggro deck, but it's not one that falls along the wayside. I've played it in a decent sized tournament before, and let me tell you that you can definitely smack some people that aren't expecting you. Red Purple Luffy, oh the mighty, have fallen, soon to be in the shadow of another Red Purple leader, I think. You've got some cute things that you can do, and you can definitely catch a lot of people off guard. So be wary of the original 3-life leader. Uta I've got in A. I think Uta is kind of like a sleeper right now. I mean, being able to swarm a lot of bodies, play something like Electrical Luna, and also maybe run something like Dead Man's Game, that's a pretty interesting leader, I think. The problem is I feel like you don't have the filtering like something like Kuzan does. Even though you get to draw a lot of cards, you get to search a lot of cards. I mean, I really think that you're one step away from being like a really cool Silver's Rayleigh kind of deck. One of my favorite leaders in Red Yellow, Sabo, actually pretty decent aggro deck that I think had a little bit of limelight, especially in the beginning of the OP11 and OP12 format. I remember reading a pretty good written article, a Japanese article, from a player that won like 2 or 3 flagships, I think, think, with the deck. How we got there, what choices he made, some of the matchups. And I think, honestly, if you're looking for a good aggro rogue deck, this is up there. Especially if you want to potentially invest in the OP13 meta. But that's a video for another day. And the fine one, green-blue Sanji. I think it was really interesting to see the green-blue Sanji in the recent Japan Championship, and I think it actually did pretty well. It could do a lot of really cute things, especially with being able to swing multiple times with characters. And I would definitely say, especially at the local level, to expect to see this on the map a couple different times. And I know there's a lot of leaders in the S tier, but especially in a rogue setting, right? We're talking about the rogue decks. One is not really above all in a specific situation. A lot of things about rogue is what the rest of the meta looks like. Especially if you make a really good meta call heading into a tournament, it could pay dividends and you could be the best choice for that tournament. But especially with the upcoming ban list coming up, and my prediction at least that the ban list is going to be enacted for the Dallas OP12 championships, I didn't want to do an OP12 meta game prediction yet because I think the ban list can change that severely. So I wanted to make a fun little rogue one instead. Let me know what you think, and feel free to debate with me in the comments about how, you know, purple yellow Rosinante is actually a heavy meta leader, or Koala, right? Black yellow Koala is a heavy meta leader that can beat blue purple Luffy 9 times out of 10. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.